You are live. Good morning. So sorry about that. We seem to have had a little technical difficulty this morning and a little tardiness in getting started, and then a disruption of our broadcast. So hopefully we can get it back together. So my apologies, because today did not go as I planned it. So let's see if we can get back our watchers. My apologies for this disruption of my broadcast. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm going to start over again. So the past year and a half, I don't know about you, but left me full of kind of some lots of emotions, right? Lots of turmoil, change, fear, anxiety, maybe even some of you even some grief. The truth is, we all have emotions. It's part of the human condition. And truthfully, we are having a hard time starting this morning. Truthfully, much of our everyday lives are driven by emotions. We go after those we like. We'd like to have more of them, and avoid those we don't like, right? Nobody wants to feel the bad ones. So emotions play a part in our decision-making, relationship success, day-to-day interactions, even our self-care. Now, I was really surprised to find very little information on the science of emotions. I do my research every morning. I pull up a topic and I start looking, and I thought, boy, I would be finding tons of information. But compared to like movement or sensory or cognitive abilities, emotion is apparently a relatively understudied neuroscience. Well, of course it is, because it's subjective, right? It's very difficult to measure. It's kind of like there's no, the scale, right? Where's the scale for all of us to regulate how we're feeling? Well, what is the study of emotions actually called? According to Wikipedia, it's called affective science, right? It's the scientific study of emotion or affect. And this includes the emotion elicitation, what gives us emotions, right? Emotional experience, and the recognition of emotions in others. So, I don't know. Good morning, Debbie. I'm so sorry. I had a little technical difficulty and we had to restart. Anyway, we're just saying from Wikipedia, affective science is the scientific study of emotion. Now, I don't know about you, I had never heard that term before. And like I said, as it turns out, the study of emotion is both an understudied part of science, as well as there's some disagreements on exactly what's going on there. So, theories and ideas about emotions, though, are as old as time. Even though the science isn't there to back them up, we all know we have emotions, right? Basic emotions were referenced in what's called the Book of Rights, a first-century Chinese encyclopedia. So they were referring to things like emotions back in the first century, right? But the word emotion didn't actually emerge in the English language until the 17th century, right? And it resulted from studies. And it resulted from some studies that began the talk of what is an emotion, right? Results from some recent studies make it clear that emotions are not just fuzzy feelings, right? That they are real. And in an objective scientific sense, they produce measurable signals in reproducible experiments. So they are there. We acknowledge them. They have a physical aspect in our body as well as impacting our thoughts. Like I said, just not a lot of science about them. So actually understanding, monitoring, managing our emotions is actually really key to our happiness and our success, right? It's so important that I dug deep and found some science just so we can know. The science is there. What I meant to say on the science is there on the physical side of what's happening emotionally. but the agreements of what emotions are and the universal emotions, that's where some of the science is a little bit lagging. So sometimes because it's a confusing subject, right? Sometimes we confuse emotions with feelings or moods, but these are not interchangeable terms. Who knew? According to the American Psychological Association, emotion is defined as a complex reaction pattern involving experiential behavior and physiological elements. Big words. Anyway, feelings come from our emotions, right? And so we have an emotion, and then we react to it, and that's our feeling. And that a mood is described as a short-lived emotional state of low intensity, right? So your mood is not rising to the level of even emotion or a feeling. But feelings not only come from our emotions, but they're also influenced by our memories, our beliefs, all kinds of other stuff. So the difference is you can be triggered to anger from something someone says. That's an emotion, anger, right? But an angry mood, you could just wake up in an angry mood for no real reason. So that's kind of how we're separating emotions from moods. Now, where do emotions come from? Well, back to the science. They come from the limbic system. It's a group of interconnected structures deep within your brain. It's the part of your brain that's responsible for behavioral and emotional response. So your limbic system owns your emotions, right? Sort of. But there are three parts of an emotion. Okay, so the emotion, scientists can't agree on necessarily the sequence or how quickly you move from one of these to the other, but they say your emotion has these three elements. So it's a subjective experience, right? This is the stimulus or the trigger. This is what happens to us. And interestingly, emotions are pretty universal according to cultures, even though the experiences that produce them can be wide-ranging. So in an experiment, we're going to talk about in a minute, Paul Ekman did an experiment where he traveled all over the world and showed pictures of faces with emotional responses on them to people, and found across cultures very, very common. We identify happy, sad, anger. We identify those across cultures the same. But what can cause those emotions? That's what we're saying. That can be anything, right? That could be a wide-ranging experience. It could be anything from seeing a color to losing a loved one, right? It could be a very broad range of things that happen. And the intense experience and a really intense experience can bring on multiple emotions at the same time. And that can be different from person to person. So we see why it's so hard to study, because the answer is always, it depends, right? It's a complex system. Now, we have a physiological response to our emotions. This is how your body reacts. It's like, well, you're in fear. Your heart starts racing in fear, or you get that visceral reaction, your gut reaction, right? Your autonomous nervous system controls involuntary body responses. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your liver functioning. That's your autonomous nervous system. That's the area where the fight or flight thing lives, right? Where we decide if we're gonna fight or flight. And this was really thought to be an emotion that helped us evolve and survive, right? As a species, that the ability to know when to fight or flight, to be on alert and avoid danger. That was a important emotion that helped us to evolve. And our studies show our autonomic, I knew I was going to have trouble with that word. Studies show our autonomic responses are strongest when our facial expression matches the emotion you're experiencing. So that's kind of weird, right? The happier you look when you're happy, the happier you feel, right? The sadder you look. But can you circumvent that emotion by not making your face portray the emotion you're feeling? I didn't read that. That's interesting, right? The brain processes emotions in a series of steps. The first step is they appraise it and assign it a value, an emotional value. This happens so quickly you don't even know it's happening. It's instantaneous, right? This happens in our limbic system. And the limbic system, that's again part of the, what do we say? The limbic system. Well, limbic system, which has fewer layers of neurons to process the information. So it's very, very quick. Now, the limbic system, also linked to memory, olfaction, and autonomic functioning, engages our emotions, engages our prefrontal cortex, right? We always talk about the prefrontal cortex. But the limbic system is a survival tool, right? It's your autonomous system. It's deciding fight or flight, stay or go, decide right now. It's not complex, and it doesn't serve the purpose of complex analysis. So it may not take into, so your first response to a trigger, your very first response that you feel may not take into account all the relevant information at your hands. So gut reaction or knee-jerk reaction, right? Sometimes we knee-jerk react because the limbic system is making an instantaneous decision based on your survival and may not take into account that there are other factors at play. So individual bias, context comes into play. Anyway, then we identify and we feel the emotion, right? Depending on where we are, what's going on around us, we might have to regulate what's going on, right? For right now, you can't really have a temper tantrum at work, can you? You got some bad news. You may have to stuff down that trigger response right away because you can't have a temper tantrum at work. Now, you may feel comfortable having it at home because it's a different situation. So we are consciously managing how we react. We can at least consciously manage how we react to the emotions we feel in response to the things that happen all around us. So then we have a behavioral response. This is action. This is how we express or how we act on the emotion. We might smile or grimace or laugh or sigh, right? Studies show, again, facial expressions universal among cultures. And it's how we signal to others how we're feeling. It's also vital to our well-being. A study in the American Journal of Abnormal Psychology found that while negative and positive emotional films that found studies in a subject while watching negative and positive emotionally films, that suppression of behavioral responses had physical effects. So if they laughed when they were supposed to laugh and laughed when they cried when they were supposed to cry, great. But if they held it in, because maybe you're a man and you don't want to cry at the movies, right? So you're managing your emotions, right? Well, they had physical responses, racing heartbeats, gut reactions, elevated anxiety levels. You're supposed to honestly express your emotions, right? Anyway, better to honestly express. Emotions can be basic or complex. So they have identified in these studies, basic emotions are just one emotion. You just have them and it is. And then complex emotions, complex emotions are two or more, combinations of two or more of the basic emotions. So, by the way, basic emotions and the responses in their facial expressions have been recorded in animals. That's how basic they are. They have done studies with animals to link yes, animals have emotions, and link emotional response and facial expressions of animals to the emotions they're feeling. It held steady even across that study, right? Now, like I said, emotional psychologist Paul Ekman, he's the one who went around in the 60s. He said, hey, nobody is studying emotions. We got to start figuring this emotion thing out. So Paul Ekman, he was kind of the pioneer on this in modern day. And he took these cards with pictures of faces and went all over the world and asked people what they thought, what emotions the face was exhibiting. And again, universally, we all recognize pain, anger. Well, here are the 7 universal emotions: anger, fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, surprise, and contempt. Some groups say there are 6. I'm not sure which is the weird 7. And some recently have taken this group and made it smaller. They've said anger and disgust and surprise and fear share the same facial expressions. So they're considering lumping those together. Now, complex emotions, these are different, right, guys? This is all new, right? They have Huge variances. They're not as easily measurable. They're not as easily discernible through your facial expressions. And they have huge variances from person to person. Because again, it is a fusion of emotions. So they say hate is a fusion of fear, anger, and disgust, right? Those are the basic emotions. Disgust is disgust, but you mix it with anger and fear, and you get hate. And these don't have standard facial recognition, facial expressions that are easily recognized. So several systems. So get back to the science. Let's go back to science. Several systems involved in our emotions. And interestingly enough, the systems that manage our emotion are linked to motivation, right? Because emotion leads to actions, right? We act on our emotions. How we act is oftentimes in reaction to our emotions. So our systems all work together. It's a little bit complicated. First, there's the dopaminergic reward. Dopamine, right? The reward system. You get a reward system for doing something that feels good. And then you have the ventral ligamental area. Oh, I think I misspelled this. The nucleus decumbens. I don't know. You'll forgive I wouldn't be able to say it right anyway. But these sit at the center and the bottom of your brain, right about the base of your temples in the middle of your brain, right? And this is the system that responds to rewards and motivates us to do what feels good, basically, right? Then the second system is the circuits of the amygdala. Now, these are two clusters of nerves about the size of almonds right here on our temporal lobes. The other one was inside at this place, but this one's in our temporal lobes here. You know how we're so much with NLP, and there's so many stress relievers that have to do with rubbing this point. Not an accident. We have a piece there that's connected to our emotions. We're physically massaging emotions when we touch this area of our face. So, two clusters of nerves, and these mediate anger, fear, and aggression, right? Anger, fear, aggression, all the leader intos of stress. So we feel stress and we rub here and maybe we get a little relief, right? Now, once the stimulus is assigned a particular emotion, something happens, you get a trigger and you go, okay, I'm going to feel angry, sad, happy, whatever. The amygdala, so it's happening in the amygdala. Amygdala is happening to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus controls what? Our autonomic nerve system, our heart rate, our blood pressure, our fear center. It's linked to our viscera, our gut reaction. The orbitofrontal cortex takes care of emotional regulation, able to manage or not manage our emotions, right? You can manage them. Don't laugh at a funeral. You have an opportunity. But people who have damage to this part of their brain actually cannot regulate those things. Actually lose the ability to either feel disparate emotions or to regulate how they act or react to those emotions. So that would be horrible. That would be a horrible damage to have. The truth is, though, emotion doesn't come from one area of the brain. It comes from all these interrelated systems, right? It goes into one spot. Then here's the interesting part. Different parts of the brain manage different emotions. Your happy emotions are held in a completely different system than your fear, anger, reward system. So it doesn't come from just one area of the brain, but they help us these systems are there to help us identify and manage and think about it, right? And like I said, interestingly, different parts of the brain, because I'm going to manage sad news differently than angry news. So we're going to, one might be a deflation, right? And a feeling of letting down. And that's a different system controlling that. That's something that's going to pump you up and make your heart beat and get you angry. So different systems at play based on different emotions. But is it all science, right? Are we all just big neuro responses that happen and, we're kind of following on a trail? No, of course not. Emotions are something that not only can you manage, but you should. Like I said, remember we said the initial response to every trigger is not necessarily the truth. We're conditioned. The process is we feel a trigger or something outside stimulus happens and we respond here. But how we respond or what we feel or what emotion is triggered at that time, that's totally dependent on our experience, right? What we've learned, what conditioning that we've had. And so we can put science to how the process happens, but how the process happens for you is specific to you, your life, your memories, your experiences, and your way of acting on those emotions. So, managing your emotions, what can we do, right? What can we do to manage our emotions? Well, first, take a look at the impact that our emotions have. If you're struggling and you find yourself constantly getting yourself in trouble because those emotions, you're not controlling them, they're controlling you, I just can't help how I feel. First step is take a look. Emotions have a purpose. Which ones are you struggling with? Take stock of your triggers, right? We all live in patterns. You can see if you sit and pay attention, bring some awareness to it, you'll see yourself repeating the same patterns or being triggered by the same kinds of responses or stimuli, even if it's not exactly the same. Think about how you'd like to respond, right? Just have a conversation with yourself, because it's always empowering to put the information in front of us. In the miasma of emotions and running around in our heads, this ethereal, unexplained area, there's fear, right? We fear what we don't know. We fear what we can't really understand. But putting your emotion into words pulls it down into your brain, right? Takes it out of this, forces you to put those feelings into the structure of sentence, of communication that other people can understand. And it's very clarifying. So the first thing to do is just understand, what am I feeling? And then secondly, aim for regulation, not repression, right? You don't want to, we've talked about repressing. We all know that while you can't act on your intense emotions all the time, not going to laugh at a funeral, right? But you don't also have to push them down. We need to feel them. You need to acknowledge them. You need to just feel them in your body, right? In your body, identify, this is no fun. I don't really like this feeling. This sucks. That's all right. You just acknowledge that they're there. Identify what you're feeling. Understand why you feel this way. Oh, this is what's happened in my life. So when this happens, I respond like this. Maybe you don't know. That's okay. You don't have to know right away, but that's kind of what you're looking for, is an explanation, right? We can grasp and understand and change what we can get our arms around and really identify with. So you put to words with what you're feeling. Identify the emotion. I am sad. I am angry. I am so frustrated. Put a word to it that can help you. Could there be another, look at the situation. Could you be interpreting the situation incorrectly? Could there be another explanation? Even if that's not the one that leapt immediately to you, if that's not the one you felt right away when things got presented, could there be another explanation? And then what do you want to do about those feelings, right? Do you want to scream? Go out of the backyard and scream. Maybe you'll feel better. Throw something, pull the covers over your head. Just acknowledge, I feel like throwing something right now. Maybe you don't even have to throw it, because just saying to yourself, I feel like throwing something, is good enough. And then think to yourself, is there a better way of dealing with this than throwing something? Maybe you could go for a walk, or pet your dog, or pick up your favorite book for 5 minutes, right? There's always a way. Now, another thing I want to do is accept our emotions. No judgment. Emotions are not good or bad. There are no emotions you should not have. It's really, get familiar with them. They are tiny little pieces of yourself. They are tiny moments in time representations of yourself. And they're part of you, part of who you collect and love and protect. Maybe try to think of them as little messengers, right? Your emotions are little messengers bringing you a telegram. It's angry out here. But get comfortable with accepting your emotions. One thing that helps is a mood journal. If you struggle with emotions, they suggest a journal where exactly this conversation I'm having with you, you have maybe maybe it's too personal to have with someone else. So you have it. But again, you want to get it out of your head, out of the abstractness of thought and into the construct of language. So a journal, pulling those thoughts out of your head and, again, forming sentences and trying to take those feelings and describe them and how you're feeling and how you're dealing with them. Writing it down can be super, super helpful in, again, helping you understand and maybe just even helping you kind of have a feeling of control. And then there's breathing. When we get nonplussed by emotions, we've all been overwhelmed. We've all had moments where we want to scream, want to throw something, want to do a little temper tantrum, right? Well, a good answer, those things don't go well at work sometimes, right? Those are not the kind of things that grown-ups are really expected, or in fact, it's frowned upon to do those things. So take a deep breath. Breathing is everything. Usually a couple of really deep breaths can interrupt a cycle. It's a reset of our parasympathetic nervous system, right? Of our limbic system. We want to just get it back to, we're in fight or flight mode. We hear something. We're off to the races. I'm going to run. I'm going to throw. I'm going to scream. A couple of deep breaths can bring us back to that center, bring us back to that area where we can think about what's going on, not just react, right? That's where we get in danger, when we bypass the thinking and just go straight to reaction. So know when to express yourself, right? There are perfectly good times to have a temper tantrum. Knowing when those times are, though, can be the difference of, well, keeping your job, of success in life, being a welcome guest at Christmas. Pretty important stuff, right? Give yourself some space. It's okay to say, I need a few minutes. It's okay to say, I can't talk about this right now. It's okay to say, I need a few deep breaths. I need a little objectivity before I'm ready to engage on this. Even before you're ready to think about the emotions. If they're so overwhelmed, it's okay to take a moment. Step back and go, I'm not going to think about this right now. I'm just going to breathe and look at the trees. And then when I'm a little bit calmer, I'm going to come back and analyze this. And then meditation, again, back to the meditation word. Doesn't that seem like it shows up in almost every list? Meditation's so good for us. So good to spend time with ourselves, and that familiarity and that peacefulness of knowing who we are and that we're okay with who we are. That gives us the strength to maybe go against the emotions we're feeling or manage those emotions in a socially acceptable way, even if we don't want to. And then lastly, stay on top of stress. Don't wait too long. Stress is a cumulative effect, right? And it is so bad for us. Just a small little bit of stress, 15 minutes of stress, can increase the cortisol in your body by an enormous percentage. And that cortisol is nothing but badness for you. It has, I don't know, I'm sure cortisol has a purpose and a use, and I need to look that up and find out what its good use is. But for most of us, it's not that good, because it's stress and it builds up, and it causes high blood pressure, and it causes fat to build up in our bodies, and it causes a blockage between us and our emotions. So when you start to feel stress, deal with it right away. Don't put it off. Don't say, I'll suppress. I'm an excellent repressor. I'll think about this tomorrow. And then you put it off until you put it off until you put it off until you're at the hospital one day with 200 over 110 blood pressure because you're not dealing with your stress. Ask me how I know about that. That's a personal experience. So anyway, that's our show today. Emotions. Emotions, we all got them. We all got to manage them. It's fun to know a little bit about the behind the scenes. I'm afraid there's far more science than I could really understand or bring here. But again, the science is all around the physical processing of our emotions. The science is a little lean when it comes to the emotions themselves and how and why they are what they are. Anyway, that's our show for today. Emotion, emotion, emotion. Hope you have a happy day. That's the emotion we're going to look for today, right? Try to make it a happy day. Don't shy away from those other emotions. Acknowledge, deal with them, and then just recognize, live a blessed life. Most of the time it's pretty good. Not good right this minute, that's okay. I'll be okay. I'll live to see another happy moment. That's our show for today. Until tomorrow, make it a happy day.